now and then I get a little bit lonely and you're never coming around. Turn around. Every now and then I get a little bit tired of listening to the sound of my tears. Turn around. Every now and then I get a little bit nervous that the best of all the years have gone by.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. It's not every day that the moon blocks the people's view of the sun. Today, there will be a partial solar eclipse in Connecticut, the most intense since 1924. That's according to local astronomer and Wesleyan professor, Dr. Meredith Hughes. But some people are heading out of state to see the eclipse in all of its glory. The Federal Highway Administration estimates that 5 million people could be traveling to the path of totality in the U.S. Are you one of them? Or do you have questions about how to safely observe where you live? We want to hear from you. Give us a call, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Wesleyan University will likely host hundreds of onlookers this afternoon with 4 solar telescopes in operation. Coming up, we'll hear from one student who's helping make the event accessible to Spanish speakers. But first, joining us now from her car in Lancaster, New Hampshire, is Dr. Meredith Hughes. She's an associate professor of astronomy and chair of the department at Wesleyan University. Thank you so much, Meredith, for being with us today.
It is such a pleasure to join you today. It's a beautiful sunny day, and I could not be more excited. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. And the fact that you're traveling while we're speaking makes us even more appreciative that you're giving us your time, especially on such a special day. So I want to start with some basics here. Can you tell us what exactly is an eclipse?
Yeah, so there are 2 kinds of eclipses that we experience routinely. There are lunar eclipses, which most of us have seen before in our lives, when the Earth's shadow falls on the moon. And today we get a solar eclipse, which is a little bit more special because it's a little bit more rare for us to experience it in our given location. And so a solar eclipse is when the moon's shadow falls on the Earth and blocks light from the sun. So what we will see from Connecticut is the moon going across the face of the sun and blocking about 92% of the face of the sun. So we'll see a little crescent sun from Connecticut, and it's going to be really cool.
And I mean, that sounds magical. And I remember when the news sort of started happening, we were all like, wait, didn't that just happen? It's like, oh, wait, it's not a solar eclipse. It was a lunar eclipse. So I'm really glad that you're able to sort of clarify that for us. And can you talk about the path of totality? You know, how would you describe that?
Sure, yeah. The path of totality is the place where the moon's shadow will completely block out sunlight. And it's a relatively narrow strip of area across the United States that's going from Mexico through northern Maine, but it's only roughly 100 miles wide. And if you're inside the path of totality, you will see the sun get completely blocked by the moon, and it'll actually be safe to take off your eclipse glasses. You'll see the solar corona. You'll see the planets come out during the daytime. You'll see some bright stars in the sky. And I can talk about this till I'm blue in the face, but I've never actually seen it happen before. Today's going to be my first time, and I am so excited.
Amazing. I mean, I can't tell that you haven't seen it ever, but the excitement is real. And because shadow is obviously a really big part of this, can you touch on the umbra shadow? Because this is one of the only opportunities that scientists have to really study it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the umbra is so there are 2 types of shadows. There's a penumbra and an umbra, and the penumbra is where you can still see a little bit of the sun peeking through. So that's what Connecticut will be in, is the penumbra, and then the umbra is the darkest part of the shadow, and that's where all of the sun's light will be blocked. And there are lots of different ways that scientists are excited about studying mostly the sun using the moon's shadow. For example, you might think like, okay, the sun is a sphere. We know the sun's shape pretty well, but actually the details of the sun's shape are something we don't fully understand, mostly because it relates to things like magnetic fields, which are really hard to model as scientists. So actually one of the questions we'll be asking, and that is one of the various citizen science projects that's going on right now, is by mapping the precise path of totality and exactly how long totality is experienced by different locations. Scientists will be able to understand a little bit better the details of the sun's shape, because we still don't completely understand exactly what the shape of the sun is and what causes changes in the shape of the sun.
And we'll definitely have more questions about the citizen science aspect of this in a little bit. But I also want to touch on the fact that it's actually really important for us to learn about this as a radio station. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, so something called space weather is a big part of the science of solar eclipses. And another thing that we'll see that people will see from the path of totality is something called the corona, which is another thing that has to do with the sun's magnetic fields. It's what launches the solar wind, which is a stream of particles that's constantly coming off the sun like a breeze. Except sometimes these magnetic fields on the sun can cause a lot of activity and send a lot of charged particles out, and that can cause what's called solar storms. And when a solar storm reaches the Earth, if it's just a little one, sometimes you get beautiful light displays like the aurora near the poles. But sometimes if it's a stronger solar storm, it has a chance of knocking out electrical grids and radio stations. So it could be a disaster for WNPR. So one of the things that scientists are interested in studying during this eclipse is understanding space weather better to be able to better predict and prepare for solar storms.
It'll be great if space weather can just wait a tiz until after we're finished, and then the space weather can do its weather thing. And just a quick reminder for our listeners that we want to hear from you. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I'm going to take a quick moment here to grab a call from James, who's calling from Hamden. James, you are on the air.
Hey, thank you. My question is about the Goldilocks effect. In other words, the moon has to be just the right size, just the right distance from the sun and the Earth for the eclipse to happen. I wonder, how is that? How is that possible?
Well, thank you so much for your question and for calling in, James. And that's a great question. Meredith, is that something that you can answer, the Goldilocks effect?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a really unique setup in our Earth-Moon system here. And James is absolutely right that we have kind of an awesome cosmic coincidence between the Earth and the Moon and the Sun, that even though the Sun is a much larger object, it's also much farther away than the Moon, which is smaller and closer. And there's just this coincidence that they happen to be almost precisely the same angular size in the sky, which is why our Moon just barely covers up the sun. And, this is actually a distinction between two different kinds of solar eclipses that you might have heard of before. A total solar eclipse is when the moon completely covers the sun. But there's also something called an annular solar eclipse, which is actually what we experienced in October. And an annular solar eclipse is when the moon has an elliptical orbit, which means sometimes it's a little bit closer to the Earth and sometimes it's a little bit farther away from the Earth. And when the moon is just a little bit farther away than normal, it actually gets a little bit smaller than the sun in the sky. So an annular solar eclipse is when the moon's shadow actually isn't quite big enough. There's no umbral spot that's quite big enough to block out the entire sun, and there's still kind of a ring of fire around the moon in the sky. So annular eclipses are pretty spectacular, but that's where we get just a little bit less lucky, and the moon is a little bit farther away, so that the sun, you can still see a little ring of the sun. But yeah, so the Earth is really the only planet in our solar system that has this cosmic coincidence that the moon just happens to be exactly the right distance away from us relative to the sun's size and distance, that it almost precisely is the same angular size in the sky on days like today where we get a total solar eclipse.
Well, and we're here talking about all things cosmic and all things cosmic coincidences today. Can you talk about how rare is this event in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I wanted to mention, actually, that we have this perception as human beings that lunar eclipses are a lot more common than solar eclipses because they're the ones that we experience most often. But actually, they have almost the same frequency. Lunar eclipses and solar eclipses happen approximately as often as one another. And the reason we have this perception is because when a lunar eclipse happens, the Earth's shadow covers up the moon. Half of the Earth can see that at the same time. The entire half of the Earth that happens to be facing the moon at that moment will see the lunar eclipse. But when a solar eclipse happens, the moon's shadow falls on the Earth, and the moon's shadow is a lot smaller. It does not cover up the whole face of the Earth. And so that's why only particular locations can see totality. That's why the path of totality is so special. And in terms of how rare these eclipses are in the United States, so everybody remembers, well, everybody who was, my kids don't remember this, but everybody who was an adult in 2017 remembers the last great American solar eclipse when the path of totality went across the middle of the United States. And we're actually pretty lucky that these things are happening so close together in time. In a given location on the Earth's surface, a total solar eclipse happens about once every 375 years.
Wow.
And the next eclipse that will go across a wide swath of the United States, there's one that's at Eclipse, Montana and North Dakota in 2044, but the next one to go across a really wide path of the United States is in 2045, which will cross the United States just a ways south of the 2017 eclipse path. And if you really want to stick around for Connecticut totality, in Connecticut, you have to wait until 2079. So our kids will have a pretty good chance of seeing totality in Connecticut in 2079. I don't know. I plan to be around 94, so we'll see if I make it that long.
Right. And then, yeah, so that's great. So now we have some time to plan for all three of those events at some point.
That's right.
And you mentioned, certain locations you get to see this more. And we know that Alaskans are in this case, the luckiest because they had 5 total eclipses over the last century and 4 more, I think, before 2020 or 2125, according to Scientific American, struggling a little bit there because it's so far away. But can you talk about how rare is this event in Connecticut? I know you touched on it a little bit, but this is pretty special, right?
It's been almost 100 years since the last total solar eclipse that came through Connecticut. So the last total eclipse that came through Connecticut was in 1925. And it actually came over the Wesleyan Observatory, and it was a huge event. Astronomers from all over the world came to the Wesleyan Observatory to observe the event. And anybody who visits Wesleyan and comes into the observatory and visits our library can see images of the total solar eclipse that were taken then. So it's been a while. And then as folks in Connecticut will remember, the most recent partial eclipse like we're experiencing today was in 2017 during that big pack across the United States. And it's going to be a while until the next one. It's going to be about 20 years.
And so a lot of people will be heading out of their houses and hopefully in safe viewing glasses later on this afternoon. Can you talk about what will people in Connecticut see today? What are we expecting here?
Yeah, so as the moon shadow starts to block out the sunlight, people in Connecticut will see, at first it'll look like a bite taken out of a cookie, and then it'll keep getting covered more and more and more until 92% of the sun's surface is eclipsed. So you'll see just a teeny tiny crescent that's about 8% of the sun's area that is left as the sun's shadow crosses, as the moon shadow crosses the face of the sun. So hopefully everybody has their safe solar viewers ready so that they can watch this. But even if you don't, it's really easy to watch the eclipse using projection techniques, and we can certainly get into that if you're interested in talking about how to view the eclipse safely.
Well, definitely. Actually, that's my next question is if you have any tips for any safety viewing of the eclipse, and also how can listeners make sure that their glasses or their eclipse glasses are up to snuff and they're not knockoffs or they're not unsafe?
Yeah, that's a question we've been getting a lot at the observatory.
Right, I bet.
So, so I think the website that I've been sending to people to the most often is the American Astronomical Society maintains a list of safe solar vendors, both brick and mortar stores and online vendors. And so if you got your eclipse glasses from any of those vendors, you're good to go. The thing to look for is you want to look for eclipse glasses that meet ISO 12312-2 standards. These were standards adopted in 2015. And the reason you want to make sure that your eclipse glasses meet those standards is because one of the dangers of staring at the sun, which is something, of course, that's never safe, including during an eclipse. It's not like it's less safe during an eclipse, it's just people are more likely to do it.
Sure.
But one of the reasons it's so dangerous is because not only is there, of course, the bright visible light that can kind of fry your eyeballs, but also there's the ultraviolet light. And it's kind of like a sunburn where you might not notice that your eyes are getting damaged until later on. And so that ISO safety standard is carefully tested to make sure that your eclipse glasses will block both visible light and ultraviolet light. Welder's glass number 14 or higher will also do it for you. And even if you have eclipse glasses that meet the ISO safety standard from 2017, since the standard was adopted in 2015, maybe you have some glasses left over from the 2017 eclipse, those should still be safe to use according to NASA. It's safe to reuse the glasses indefinitely, but you have to check very carefully to make sure there are no creases, gaps, scratches, pinholes, anything that has damaged the film since 2017. If there's any damage to your eclipse glasses, if you can put them on and you can see anything other than the sun through your eclipse glasses, I would throw them away and get some new eclipse glasses just to be safe.
All right, friends.
The other thing is you don't, I was just going to say, the other thing is you don't have to have special solar viewers. You can use projection. So one thing that we'll be handing out at our Wesleyan event today is crackers. I highly recommend the Keebler Club crackers because they have little holes in them, and if you hold them over a sheet of paper during the eclipse, you'll see little crescents projected onto the sheet of paper. You can do this with like a colander if it has small holes. You can go outside and look for tree shadows that should be in the shape of crescents. It's going to be really cool.
So I just want you to know that to paint this image in your head, my producer and I are looking at each other right now going, what? You can use crackers? Our mind is blown, and we're absolutely going to do that. Thank you for that tip.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, friends, if you cannot fry your eyeballs, that would be great. And related to all the, make sure you know that your glasses are safe and watch the eclipse today safely. Are there other questions about safety that you're getting that we might not expect?
Well, I will tell you one that I have gotten a surprising amount, which is, should my dog be inside during the eclipse? Do I have to keep my dog inside during the eclipse? And the answer is no, you do not have to keep your dog inside during the eclipse. Your dog will be fine. Your dog is no more likely to want to look at the sun today than any other day. And they probably won't even notice that there's an eclipse happening, honestly.
All right. And you're reading my mind because I did want to ask you, Wesleyan does have own plans to monitor how animals are reacting, right? So dogs aside, what does that look like today, you think?
Yeah, so this is actually part of one of the NASA citizen science projects that's going on during the eclipse. And it's actually Russell Library, our partners for the Wesleyan event today, that are going to be putting up the monitoring equipment at Wesleyan. So in Wesleyan's permaculture area, which we call Wild West, we will have a sound recording device that will pick up the sounds of animals during the partial eclipse. Things like if there are any insect noises or bird noises. There's a NASA citizen science project to try to study how animals respond to eclipses. And it presumably won't be as dramatic as in the partial eclipse zone as it will be in the path of totality, but that's part of the question that they're trying to answer with this study. So again, it's a project called NASA Soundscapes. And anybody can participate in it, although I think at this point you probably have to have the recording equipment ready.
Right. We'll have to follow up with that. We'd love to hear literally what that sounds like. You've been listening to Wesleyan astronomer Dr. Meredith Hughes, who will be staying with us. And before we head to break, let's hear from Kion Wolf, who's a host of Audacious on Connecticut Public, and she landed in Vermont just a few hours ago.
It's 2:42 in the morning. And I just pulled into my friend's driveway in Derby, Vermont, where we will get about 3 minutes of totality later today. And as I'm driving up, I'm pondering, what am I doing here? Why am I driving nearly 4 hours in the middle of the night? Which, by the way, great technique. There was absolutely no traffic, not even a little bit. But I think the answer is really obvious why. It's awe. We are awe hunters. And I know you can find the awe in the ordinary, but this is something really, truly spectacular. And when I was driving up, I was listening to one of my favorite bands, Metric. And at the end of one of their songs, the lyrics go, "Come on, baby, play me something like Here Comes the Sun." It made me think about how when the eclipse recedes and the sun is revealed again, there might be a sense of nostalgia is not the right word. Maybe there's a good German word for it, but sort of sad to see the sun again, which is a strange thing to think about, and wanting to hold on to the eclipse for a little while longer, but I guess the fleetingness is what makes it particularly special, particularly awesome. I also hope I can just lighten up and enjoy the eclipse. I'm going to lighten up and enjoy the eclipse and report back later. Good night. I love you.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, all eyes will be on the eclipse, literally, with our eclipse glasses on. We spoke with one umbraphile, or eclipse lover, about what you're likely to see in the path of totality. Here's psychologist and author Kate Russo.
If you think you've seen an eclipse before and you think, well, what's the big deal? You have to get in the path of totality to understand and to experience it, because so much happens in a very, very short period of time. In those final moments when the moon fully covers the sun, so many things happen very rapidly within like a minute or two. So the changes are quite obvious. So the central moon's shadow sweeps across, and you can actually, if it's a clear sky, you can see the sky darkening, which is a very unusual feeling. And, it puts the hair on the back of my neck stands up when I see that. It is just always, even though I know it's coming, because it's just so unnatural. And you have this feeling of something ominous is happening. This will be my 14th total solar eclipse. And I know at that moment, it will still catch me by surprise. So I'll never get tired of that. But then the moon's shadow sweeps over, we're cast into that darkness, and then it is so otherworldly. It is truly remarkable. And when your eyes adjust, you look up, and where the sun was moments ago, it just looks like there's a hole in the sky. And it's unbelievable, because that's where the sun should be, and it's not there. And then as your eyes adjust, you can see the corona, which is the outer atmosphere of the sun. And it's beautiful. And each time it appears differently. And it's just stunning. It's just something, it's a sight to behold. And if you can tear your eyes away from that, there's even more to see. So if you look up, you'll see the indigo blue of the sky. It's a really deep, it's not pitch black, but it's really deep, and we'll be able to see some planets, possibly some of the brightest stars. And then if you tear your eyes away from that, if you look around you, 360-degree sunset, and that's the light from outside of the path of totality. And that's really unusual and very special. If you can tear yourself away from that, you look at the people around you. Everyone, there's all this exuberance as totality happens, and then people sort of go a little bit quiet because we're in that moment where we're just taking it all in, and you just want to savor those minutes.
And now back with us is Dr. Meredith Hughes, who's Associate Professor of Astronomy at Wesleyan University. So Meredith, earlier, I think you mentioned that this is actually your first total eclipse. Can you share with us, what's going through your mind right now?
Yeah, so the 2017 total eclipse, we thought about traveling to the path of totality, but we had a 1-year-old at the time, and we thought we were not going to try to drag a 1-year-old into all of that craziness. So I made myself a promise at that time that we would go all out to see totality in 2024, and here we are in the path of totality, and I am so excited to experience it for the first time. I loved hearing that description. I've been reading, of course, all about what the experience of total solar eclipse is like, and for anybody who hasn't seen this before, Anne Dillard has a beautiful essay about seeing a solar eclipse. I think it was in 1979, but they reprinted it in The Atlantic this year, and it's just written so gorgeously. And she has a great line in there about how the difference between a partial eclipse and a total eclipse is kind of like the difference between kissing a man and marrying him, or flying in an airplane and jumping out of an airplane, that one is a precursor to the other, but the first experience does not prepare you at all for the second experience.
Those are amazing metaphors, I think. The drama behind it. And another quick reminder for our listeners that give us a call if you want to share your experience or let us know what you're up to today. 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I'm going to take a quick call from Rusty Moore, who is traveling to totality. Rusty, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
We're here in Burlington. We just got into Burlington, Vermont a few minutes ago. We stopped for breakfast, and next step will be to figure out exactly where we're going to set up our gear.
Well, it sounds like a fully planned day. What are your hopes for the day, Rusty?
Well, my wife and I are both ham radio operators, and we're planning to operate in a special event that's going on today called the Solar Eclipse QSO party, or it's a contact party where you talk to as many people as you can during the day of the eclipse, and then the object is to collect data on the way the eclipse affects the signal propagation. The way signals get from one place to another, bouncing off the ionosphere.
And is this something that you've done before? Is this your first eclipse or your 14th eclipse? What has that been like, Rusty?
It'll be my second total eclipse.
All right, close
I've
to
seen
14.
others. I almost was in the path of a total eclipse when I was 11 years old, but I was just on the other end of North Carolina at the time, so I didn't see it total. But I've seen a few partials. Saw an annular eclipse in '84. This is the second total, though.
And as a ham radio operator, and you're setting up gear for that, can you tell us exactly what you're doing with the equipment?
Yeah, well, we're going to set up some antennas and some radio transceivers, receivers, transmitters, and so we'll be talking to people around the country, possibly around the world. It depends on what the ionosphere does for us. But we're going to talk to as many as we can, and then the data will be collected, as I said, and then analyzed to tell us more about how the sun affects the ionosphere, and how we know that the signals bounce off of the ionosphere to get from one place to another, and the eclipse, because it's the sun that's creating the ionosphere, the eclipse will definitely have an effect on it, and that's what we hope to find out more about.
No, that sounds really exciting, but can you explain to our listeners and myself, actually, what exactly is an ionosphere and why is today so special to do that?
Well, the ionosphere is a layer of the Earth's upper atmosphere that is ionized or excited by the ultraviolet light from the sun. And during the daytime, the sun creates more of the ionization in the atmosphere. If you imagine a radio signal bouncing off of the upper atmosphere in the daytime, it bounces off of the lower part of the atmosphere, or it gets absorbed entirely. So it's always changing depending on what time of day it is and what's going on up there. But when the sun is blotted out by the moon, then that will affect the amount of ultraviolet that reaches the atmosphere in your area. And that will in turn affect how your signal is transmitted or how it's received in other places.
Well, thank you so much, Rusty, for taking the time and sharing your experience with us while you're scrambling with your equipment. We wish you all the best of luck for today.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you again to Rusty, who is setting up shop to check out the eclipse today. And Meredith, you were listening to Rusty's call. Can you tell us about your scientific perspective on this process of sort of playing with the ionosphere? It sounds like there's a lot of data to be gathered and a lot to be studied just from today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it turns out that in my normal astronomical life, I'm actually a radio astronomer. So I appreciate the ham radio community so much. They do such cool science, and they're so skilled with their technical equipment. And I think there's this other citizen science project. I don't know if it's exactly the one Rusty's participating in, but it's called HamSci, where they're bouncing signals off the ionosphere. And I think it's another great way to learn about space weather and about this protective layer of electrons high up in the Earth's atmosphere that is affected by how much sunlight we receive and by these perturbations where all of a sudden it's sunny and then it's not sunny.
Right.
So that's great. And it's also making me excited about one of the things that will be happening at our Wesleyan event today, which is that one of our ingenious students at Wesleyan has been working with me over the past year to update our radio telescope, and we will actually be observing the sun at multiple wavelengths today, both in the visible with our eclipse glasses and our solar telescopes, and also with our radio telescopes. That was part of our rain or shine plan, because it turns out that radio waves can travel through clouds, and so it's possible to view the eclipse even if we have cloud cover using our radio telescope. So it's great to bring in this multi-wavelength perspective, and I think people are going to be studying the sun today all across the electromagnetic spectrum, and the more the better, right?
Right.
We will learn so much.
Right, and I mean, the merrier the better for sure, and I've been loving hearing sort of the different experiences and the different plans for today. And while we're discussing the many plans for today, I want to take a moment to play an exchange between our senior health reporter, Sujata Srinivasan, and her 9-year-old son, Nikhil, discussing their plans for the day.
How do you feel that you're going to see your first solar eclipse?
I feel like it'll be cool. My friend's coming, I know that, so I'm excited for that. Are we going to be biking too?
Are you more excited about biking than seeing the eclipse in the path of totality?
I mean, no. No, but biking's still fun. And Lake George, Appa said it was like a really big lake, so I'm excited to see that too. I know the eclipse is only 3 minutes, so I mean, the eclipse, it's like you just stand there and watch, and while biking, it's more active, so.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So the sun, the moon, they do their thing, but there's nothing much for you to do, right? I mean, there's actually nothing for you to do.
Well, you can just sit there and watch, and then realize how small you actually are.
Yeah. That's true, right? It kind of space puts things in perspective, right?
Yeah, because the moon is like, I have no clue if this is accurate or not, but like the size of Connecticut or way bigger. Something tells me way bigger.
Yeah, I think you should go with your gut. I mean, your gut of the moon being bigger than Connecticut is right. So, hey, listen, I got this question for you.
What?
Do you know how long you have to wait to see the next eclipse? 20 years.
25?
2044. Okay, so Lake George is not in the path of totality.
I know, but I think it's Pinnamonac?
No, Plattsburgh.
Oh, Plattsburgh.
Plattsburgh is in New York. Dad said he's going to make a pinhole camera with you. Are you excited by it?
I'd rather see the eclipse through the glasses than the pinhole camera, but I mean, it must be fun to make for sure. No, it's called the pinhole box thingy. That's what I always call it, the pinhole box thingy.
Pinhole box thingy.
I think Nikhil speaks my language here, the pinhole box thingy. Meredith, does this sound a bit like what's been happening in your own car this morning with your kids?
Oh, absolutely. I was laughing throughout that whole sound clip because it's very relatable. My kids are 5 and 8 years old, and I think that the 5-year-old, I was wondering if he had any kind of conception of what's going to happen with the eclipse today, and he came home from school one day all excited, and he said, "Mama, I learned at school about the eclipse, and I know that you have to take off your glasses only when the moon completely covers the sun." I said, "That's great. Did you remember that from when we talked about it?" He said, "No, I watched a video." So he's excited to watch the videos at school. And the 8-year-old, I think, is a little bit more excited to actually see what would happen. But he was asking this morning, "Wait, why are we here already if the eclipse doesn't happen until the afternoon?"
Right.
So that was pretty funny.
I mean, a legitimate question, and we'll see if any of these kids decide to become an umbraphile. But do you suspect that maybe you will become an eclipse chaser yourself after today?
I don't think I should guess at this point, really. I think it's been a big deal to make all our plans and get to the path of totality. And so part of me thinks, oh gosh, I don't know if I can do this again in 20 years. But part of me thinks, there really might be something here, and we'll see what happens.
Well, we're excited to see that because we can start making plans for that today. You've been listening to.
I was just going to say the kid thing again. I was reading an article recently about how kids who saw the total eclipse in 2017, what they remember about the event. So kids who were kind of in this sort of 5 to 10 year age range, and it's really funny because it varies from like, I remember this bizarre experience, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, to I don't actually remember the eclipse itself. I remember eating moon pies, though. So it's really hard to predict what kids will remember around this event.
Well, now I'm going to remember moon pies, and it's a different kind of experience today. So, thanks for sharing that. You've been listening to Wesleyan astronomer Dr. Meredith Hughes, who will be sticking around. And listeners, let us know if you have any questions about the eclipse or our plans for today. Call us 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
With the stars up above in your eyes, a fantabulous night to make romance neath the cover of October skies. The leaves on the trees are falling to the sound of the breezes that blow. I'm trying to please to the calling of your heartstrings that play soft and low. The night's magic seem to whisper and hey. The soft moonlight seems to shine.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This hour, we're talking all things eclipse. The Federal Highway Administration expects some 5 million people will be traveling to see the eclipse in the path of totality in the U.S. We spoke with one psychologist who has seen 13 eclipses and soon to be 14. Kate Russo has interviewed many of her fellow umbraphiles, also known as eclipse-chasers, and she believes the natural phenomena has a unique way of bringing people together.
This is a fully immersive experience. And how I like to describe it is by saying that the experience of totality happens above us, around us, and within us. Because during those moments, we do feel very profound changes. We feel very insignificant, yet connected to something so much greater. In those moments, we understand that we play just a very small part in our big, vast universe. And I like to compare that to when I hear that in my clinical practice. So if someone comes in to see me as a clinical psychologist and then they say, I feel insignificant, that's a really, really difficult state to be in. But when we feel that during a total solar eclipse or any truly awe-inspiring moment, that feeling of insignificance feels so empowering. It feels so positive, and it's because it comes along with that feeling of connection. The way you think about the world, and for using psychology terms, it's your ego dissolves, and so you're no longer thinking about yourself as the center of everything. You understand that it's part of something greater, and so that collective feeling is so much more pronounced. So there's really great research now that shows that when we experience awe repeatedly, that we become more pro-social, we become more altruistic. And that's really great to see because awe is the central component of the total solar eclipse experience. You know, the gratitude that we feel after the eclipse, it stays with us. We want to do things to help other people. And if you talk to any eclipse chaser that has been chasing for a long period of time, you will find that they're doing things to make it easier for others to experience totality because we just so want everybody else to experience it because it's so profound.
And back with us to discuss is Dr. Meredith Hughes, a Wesleyan astronomer. Dr. Hughes, we've been talking about Kate Russo and would love to get your response to what she has to say. You know, can you talk about why is this such a special event for you as a scientist and an astronomer?
Yeah, what she said really resonated with me. And the thing that I am most excited about today is the fact that millions of people around the country are excited about looking up at the sky and marveling at our place in the universe. And this is something that, I feel like I get to do it all the time as a professional astronomer. It's one of the perks of my job. Although I have to say that when I grade term papers, I do joke sometimes, but it's actually true that every time I grade term papers, I have a little existential crisis because students love to write about the end of the universe and the gradual heat death of our reality. But there's actually something to it that when you think about your place in the cosmos, it takes you out of yourself a little bit. It makes you think about how interconnected humanity is, what a tiny little planet we're on, how we're stewards of this planet. We have to take care of it. And if everybody gets a little sense of that awe, that we're all in it together, that amazing feeling that astronomers get to experience basically on a daily basis in our jobs, then I think that's the best possible thing that could come out of this eclipse.
Well, tell your students thanks because now I'm going to be thinking about heat death after this. But we do have a quick question from a caller, Harry in East Hampton. Can you safely take pictures with your cell phone today when you're checking out the eclipse or camera as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is I would not recommend it. But you can, it's pretty easy to find filters. And if you're very careful with your eclipse glasses, you could also hold your eclipse glasses over the camera phone, over the lens of your camera phone to try to take pictures. But you should not use an unfiltered camera phone to try to view the eclipse.
Well, thank you so much, Harry, for that question. And I know we earlier mentioned an event that's happening at Wesleyan today. Can you tell us more about what's happening?
Yeah, this is something that we've been working on with our partners at Russell Library for, almost about a year now. And so we're partnering with Russell Library, and we are going to have so we're going to have 4 solar telescopes. We have about 3,700 eclipse glasses that we will be handing out for free at Wesleyan University between 2:30 and 4:30 p.m. And we've got a lot of other stuff going on. The library's bringing a table where you can sign up for library cards and check out books on space right there. And we will have students walking around in bright red T-shirts with event staff lanyards who are going to be able to answer your questions about eclipses. They'll be handing out eclipse glasses. They'll be handing out crackers to play with projection. And it'll just be a big party on top of Foss Hill. We'll also have the NASA TV live stream of Totality going on in our library, and then we'll have planetarium shows like every 15 minutes or so happening in our classroom. So we're hoping that people will come out and view the eclipse together, share the love for the sky, and enjoy this gorgeous day that we've been given to watch the eclipse.
Well, and then talk about unity. That sounds like so many things happening, but sounds really fun. And what is even more fun now is joining us on the phone to tell us more about this event is Carlos Ordoñez, who's a junior at Wesleyan University studying astronomy and also a Coast Guard veteran. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And can you tell us about some of the preparations that you've been doing for this event?
Yeah, of course. A lot of it has been training, and although telescopes might seem safe, when they're pointing straight at the sun, they're not. So a lot of it has just been about training, the telescopes, the planetarium, and just kind of coordinating just in case a lot of people show up, which we hope a lot of people do show up.
Right. And what are you expecting at today's event?
Can you say that again, please?
What are you expecting at today's event? What are you hoping to see?
Oh, yes. Well, I hope a lot of people show up, and I hope that the sky stays as clear as it is right now.
Crossing the fingers.
Yeah. Yeah, no. That's pretty much it. And I just hope that people are as excited as I am, because it's going to be pretty great.
Well, I feel like the excitement has been just like oozing out of this show today. And Carlos, you've also been prepping to make sure that this event is accessible bilingually. So can you talk about those efforts as well?
Yeah, of course. So myself and another astronomy student, we have an astronomer table where we will share information and answer any questions that the public may have in both English and Spanish. And this has been something we've been going throughout the semester, and have outreach programs with students at Middletown School. So really excited to just share the eclipse in every language, basically.
And this seems like an obvious question because we've been talking about how cool today is going to be. But, what are you excited about as far as your own experience of the eclipse?
This is my first time seeing a solar eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. Two, I'm excited to share this moment with a lot of the public,
mm-hmm.
and just share this with as many people as possible, really.
Well, and because you want to share with so many people, and we've been talking about unity and how a lot of human beings gather together to be in awe together, is that important to you? Is that something that you've been thinking about?
I think so. I don't think these kind of things happen a lot, and I don't think there aren't that many moments of unity, and I think this is a very unique moment where people of all races, color can just come together and observe something that belongs to all of us. It's not just an individual thing. It's a whole community event.
And Meredith, earlier we talked about hoping a lot of people come to this event. How many visitors do you think you're expecting?
We have no idea. And I am just smiling ear to ear listening to Carlos talking today, because the students have been working so hard on this event, and I think they're really well prepared to make it a success. All of the faculty are off in the path of totality somewhere trying to observe the eclipse. And so we've got postdocs and students, including both undergrads and master's students, who have been working so hard to make this a success and to make sure that this event is accessible to our community. So I hope that lots of people will turn out to visit them. I think they will. We've been getting a lot of calls at the observatory this week, and the library's been getting a lot of calls too. And so just everybody, please be nice to our students. They worked so hard on this, and they're doing their best.
Oh, but yes, please be nice to students. It's very difficult to do this. I mean, you're smiling, and I think we've been smiling this whole show too, just because it's just so fun. And it's so nice to hear that people are excited for something like this. And Carlos, we've been asking this question throughout the show. Do you suspect that maybe you'll become an umbraphile or eclipse-chaser after today?
I think so. I think, yeah, for sure. I think this time I wanted to stick around Wesleyan just because
mm-hmm.
I wanted to see what the public was going to be like. And I think for the next few eclipses, I'll definitely chase around the eclipse.
Well, an eclipse chaser, I think, will be a nice thing to tack on to your thesis. I'm just thinking. Cool. And we've got about a couple minutes here, Meredith, but we'll love some final thoughts for our listeners. What do you hope listeners get from our conversation today?
Yeah, I think just kind of to sum it up, I hope that everybody realizes that the eclipse is something special that doesn't happen too often, and it's something that's really accessible. It's an event that everybody, not only on the path of totality, but also the people who are experiencing a partial eclipse, get to take away a little bit of that awe and joy and just marveling at the cosmos that astronomers get to experience all the time in their work. And I hope that everybody will be able to take just a little bit of time out of their day to go and stare safely at the solar eclipse and think about our place in the universe and all of the amazing things that we're going to learn from this eclipse.
Right. And just another reminder for listeners that please check the safety standards on your glasses. We do not want any stories about fried eyeballs. Thank you very much. That's a PSA from where we live today. And Carlos, final thoughts from you too. What do you hope our listeners get from this conversation?
I just hope that they hear this and they come to Middletown and visit Wesleyan University. And the more people they have, the more fun it'll be. And yeah, super excited.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Carlos. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And you are also listening to Dr. Meredith Hughes, who's an associate professor of astronomy at Wesleyan University. Thank you, Meredith, for being with us today and sharing your experience.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, listeners, we hope you get a chance to marvel at the cosmos today. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Katie Pellico. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you so much for listening.
Stars. I wanna